Hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa. I am a registered nurse with Plunkett Line, and you have joined us today for our Starting Solids chat. I'm here with my coworker, Lisa.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa. I'm one of the nurses here on Plunkett Line.
Cool. So today, like I discussed, we're going to be talking about starting solids, which is a really big topic, one that Lisa and I are both really passionate about, and could talk your ear off on. So we'll try and keep it quite kind of concise. And again, if you have any questions, you can pop it in the comments below, or you can always call us at Plunkett Line as well and have a really in-depth conversation with any of the Plunkett Line nurses. Things that we're going to focus on today are going to be signs of readiness and when to start solids, what to start solids with, what are some of the first foods that you can choose, your common allergens, which is another big topic that we quite often will get asked about, what those allergens are, and what are some of the common reactions that might happen. Bowel habit changes, which again is a very common call that we get at Plunkett Line after starting solids. Tips on fussy eaters. Moving on, when do we start and introduce more solids to our babies? Food safety and preparation and storage. And another exciting thing today, our friends at Watties have got a giveaway. So make sure that you pop a comment down below or a question for us to answer, and you will go into the draw for that. So without further ado, we'll get started on our solids chat.
Cool. Thanks, Alyssa, for your great introduction. Cool. So, our first question today is what are the signs of readiness and why do we start solids?
Yeah. So big question. A lot of people don't really understand why we start solids with babies. And the reason that we start babies is by about that 6-month mark, babies' iron reserves have been depleted. And breast milk and formula no longer give them enough iron to sustain them. We know that iron is really important for healthy development, for oxygenation, brain development, that kind of thing. So we need to start solids with iron-rich foods to be able to sustain our babies. And that needs to be done with a really well-balanced diet right from the start. Also really important to note with our solids, we tend to start somewhere between that 4 to 6 months, ideally the closest to 6 months we can get for their gut health. We want the microbiome and the tummy to be ready, their guts to be mature enough to be able to properly develop and handle and digest the solids as well. So the closer we can get to that 6-month mark, the better for that as well. So it's just going to kind of help them in the long run with that. A lot of times there's also the signs of readiness that people will talk
Mm.
about. Most common ones that we want to watch for is interest. Is your baby watching you while you're eating? Are they opening their mouth when you open your mouth to take a bite? Are they trying to grab at your food? Are they able to sit up mainly unassisted, right? Because we want that good digestive tract. We don't want a baby who's
Mm.
slumped over. That's going to increase our risk for things like choking and gagging, not going to help our digestion because none of us sit and eat all slumped up. We want them to have really good head control, again, for the same reasons, decrease our risk of choking and gagging with those. Another big thing is if we pop a spoon or a piece of food into the baby's mouth, are they accepting it and kind of chewing and making those motions as opposed to pushing the food back out with their tongue? If those are happening, your baby's most likely not ready, and you
Mm.
need to take a step back. There is no major, huge rush to force a baby into solids too early. There is
Mm.
that bit of a window where we want them to start the solids, and it's a bit of a golden window that you can kind of hit where they're ready. Whereas if we hold off too long, which tends to mainly be, I think, a lot of times parental fear around starting solids, is then you kind of do have issues introducing solids because the babies are kind of like, what is this and why am I doing this now? So it is, again, it's kind of that great opportunity, but watching those signs of readiness. And again, if
Mm.
you're not sure, have a chat with your Plunkett nurse or your well child provider. Give us a call and we can have a chat with that at Plunkett Line as well. And a lot of evidence is kind of going, there's, new evidence all the time on starting solids, why we're starting solids, what we should be starting with, how we're doing it, and that kind of thing. And we will always go kind of based on what that is and what the Ministry of Health is kind of recommending. A
Mm.
lot of people will recommend to start with baby rice. It's kind of the most common one I think that a lot of people will call us about and say, I've started with baby rice. if you choose to do that, it is fortified with iron. Um, I think for a lot of us at Plunkett Line, we will tend to try and get you to kind of steer in the other direction of starting on real solids and starting on foods that you can home make yourself and do some purees that are probably
Mm,
more nutritionally sound for a baby than a rice cereal. If you started with that, no harm done, no harm foul. It's totally fine.
mm,
It's out there for a reason. But again, you can make that in combination with other things to just give our babies more iron-rich foods, easier things for them to digest, and more nutritionally sound. So yeah, so we'll start and talk a little bit about that as well. So Lisa, if your little one is ready for solids, what do you start with, and how do you start?
cool. So I just first of all just like to say that with baby led weaning, we do know that it is on the rise, but we are not going to talk about it today, just as the Ministry of Health does not recommend it and has not endorsed it at the moment. So we're and it's sort of a thing that you do yourself, you research yourself, and make a decision. But at the moment, for this particular live chat, that we won't be talking about baby led weaning. So first things, so yeah, solids is a really great topic, and we do get lots and lots of calls here on Plunkett Line that are related to starting solids, what sort of things to make, and one thing that we do encourage to do in that first month of from 6 months is to start with the purees. And then over a time to begin to introduce foods with lumps, mashed or steamed vegetables and fruit. Also introducing different textures, so grated as well, and then a soft food, which basically means that when it's soft enough that you can squish the food between your thumb and your finger. And yeah, so also we don't say to introduce finger food as well, just because at 6 months of age, their mouths are quite small, like the tract. There is a risk of choking, so we do say not to do that. Also, the mouth and the tongue is still developing, so we do say to start with puree. Homemade versus what you can buy at the supermarket. We do get a few calls about that. Obviously, a food in a pouch from the supermarket is really convenient. We do say to use a spoon, so squeeze it onto the spoon and then feed the baby, rather than getting baby to suck from the pouch. Of course, there are, like I said, pros and cons with homemade food versus buying the food. Even things like price is one, versus the effort that you have to put into making the foods. There's one thing that is quite good when you are making homemade foods is that you are ensuring that you don't add any sugar or salt, and preparing homemade food, so things like peeling the skin off the fruit and vegetables, cook it until it's tender in a small amount of water. If you want to, you can put a little bit of breast milk or formula into the food as well. And then we'll talk about allergens, but there's no need to introduce new foods one at a time unless you're adding something like an egg or fish or something as well. Things that we can start with, like Alyssa said, so baby rice, other iron-rich foods, so meat, minced, mashed, chicken, fish, and then for our vegetarian community. So beans, lentils, they're full of iron as well, which is
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
cool. Cool. So, uh, yeah, Alyssa, a really common concern for whānau is allergens. Do you have any tips around that and
Hmm.
keeping your baby safe?
Yeah, and I think this is again quite a common call that we get is babies having reactions and varying degrees of severity as well, right? So our common allergens: soy, eggs, cow milk, peanuts, tree nuts. So two different things. Peanuts and tree nuts are two different things. Peanuts come under the kind of legume family as they grow underground. Tree nuts obviously grow in trees. Wheat, shellfish, and fish. So those are kind of common allergens. They're the ones that we'll tend to say if you are going to introduce them in isolation. So what we mean by that is if you're going to do, let's say, something like fish, you may mash fish up with something like orange kumara, pumpkin, something you've tried before, you know your baby's had multiple times with no reactions. You give that to them in isolation with that food. And ideally, you're going to introduce it 3 days in a row. So starting with a small amount, increasing your amount each day so that you're kind of watching for those reactions. Another
Mm,
thing I always recommend when people call, introduce your allergen away from nap time and early in the day. Don't give them food with a high allergy, something like peanut butter or a nut butter, fish, eggs. Don't give it to them and pop them down for a nap 10 minutes after they've had those solids. You want to be able to watch for a reaction. Generally, if it's a very severe reaction, your baby's going to react within the first kind of 15 to 20 minutes, which is why, as well, when we have immunizations, we're asked to wait for those 20 minutes. And then if
mm,
you have something like a skin reaction, hives, something like that, it will kind of reach its peak and kind of taper off within a 2-hour mark. So again, those first, at least, kind of, I always say to people, at least that first hour, really watching our babies to make sure that nothing's going to happen to them with those. And again, if baby doesn't react on day one, does not mean that there will be no reaction on day 3. Okay, or
mm,
even later. So that's, again, you're always watching if you're giving a common allergen. Types of reactions, like I said, in those first kind of 15 to 20 minutes, generally in the first 10 minutes, if you're going to have something severe like an anaphylactic reaction, it's going to happen very quickly. So if you have any change to breathing, your baby becomes labored breathing, wheezing, any color changes. If you notice any swelling, so swelling of the tongue, swelling of the lips, swelling of the face, swelling of the neck, either call us right away, do not hesitate, or call 111.
mm,
If baby calms down by the time that the paramedics get there, they will be more than happy to let you drive yourself to the hospital, follow up with the GP, than not. Um, so if you have those, sometimes coughing, you may get nasal congestion, watering eyes are other common symptoms. Sometimes you'll get hives, you may get a rash on the face that may pop up. Sometimes you'll have vomiting. So those are really kind of your common reactions that you may see. If you do
mm,
have a rash that's popped up, warm soap and water, wash baby really well. Try and get as much of that. If it's on their clothes, get the clothes off. Try and get
mm,
any food that's contacting the skin away. So warm soapy wash, and again, watching them for those reactions. Um, some people, if you have a parent who has a severe reaction to one of the common allergens, need to be even more vigilant with their child. Okay, I've had friends who've had severe egg allergies in their families, and they've literally had a picnic outside of ED to introduce eggs for
mm,
the first time. Absolutely fine. Another thing
yeah,
I'll say to parents, if you're concerned about introducing an allergen, make sure there's 2 of you there,
mm,
that you're not alone,
yeah,
so that if something does happen, then you've got extra hands on deck to kind of be
mm,
able to help. Okay. And
mm,
again, any concerns about allergies, give us a call. Another thing with allergens that's really important and kind of new advice is to introduce them early, right? We're not going to wait till babies are over a year old. We're not going to wait. We want to do it early and often. So once you've got an allergen that's introduced, you've done it for 3 days in a row, we know baby's not having a reaction. We want to give it often, at least once a week, if not a couple of times a week, so we can keep that up in the baby system, and we
Mm-mm.
can keep that kind of going to watch for those reactions. Okay. So again, any questions, give us a call at Plunkett Line. So Lisa, once you've got babies who have started our solids, there's going to be changes that are going to come. It's going to go in one end, maybe not going to come out the other end so easily.
Yeah.
So when parents call us, which again, very common, I think we probably each get this phone call at least once a shift, and that's just us. I'm sure the other nurses get them as well. So, what's some of the advice that we give parents when they call us about constipation and the introduction of solids?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, like Alyssa said, we do get it. This call maybe up to 3 times, sometimes 3 in a row. So we definitely know about this situation. And as you can imagine, it is very common. Um, you are introducing your baby from having just milk to all of a sudden having food.
Hmm.
So the poo may be thicker. Let's just say it. Let's just talk about poo. Darker. At times it can be a struggle to get out. They'll go blue, go red in the face and
Yeah.
strain, and that's okay. So if you do have any concerns, yeah, like Alyssa said, please give us a call. We're more than happy to talk to
We
about
love to talk
some of the
about poop.
symptoms. Yeah, some of the symptoms of constipation, and I'll just quickly run through them. So, any sort of reduced appetite, reduced wet nappies, if they're a little bit less in their appetite, vomiting, please give us a call. Some babies do change their poo from say once a day or twice a day, and it might be quite a few days, in 3 or 4 days. That's okay if everything else is looking okay. If you do have concerns, you can always call us. So some of the things that we say to do, it includes giving foods that start with P,
Hmm.
because poo starts with P. So let's give food that starts with P. So things like pumpkin, pears, peaches, potatoes, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure prunes aren't till 8 months. Do you recommend?
Yeah, there are different ways you could prepare them. I mean, obviously, you're not going to give, a 6-month-old baby a dry piece of fruit, but there are ways that you can prepare them safely for them as long as they're kind of into those kind of, you can get it fine enough. And if you steep them in really hot water, like boiling water, so steep
Mm,
them, so that they come really, really soft. You can blitz them up with things like pears, and they can kind of hit that as long as babies are kind of okay and they're in that kind of mash texture. Then that makes them a lot easier for them to eat. And they will blitz up really, really fine. So you can mix a little
mm,
puree or mash with them like that. Um,
yeah.
and then I always recommend to parents as well to use that juice. It's essentially like watered down prune
Yes.
juice. Use that in other
Yeah.
things to kind of thin out your purees if
Mm,
you're making things as
yeah.
well, or to thin out your mashes.
Yeah. Yeah. We also just put prunes in a cup in hot water and then let them soak in and then use the liquid from that as well,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
helps.
Yeah.
Other things like tummy time, bicycle legs, so yeah, moving your baby's legs like a bicycle, a warm bath and a baby massage is also good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um Cool. The
Water.
other
Water intake.
yeah,
We got to make sure
water.
they're drinking. Yeah.
Yes, water.
Mhm.
So offering water at each meal. So whether it's in a sipper cup, or an open cup, find something that works for baby. They will play with it. They will spill it on themselves, and that's okay. It's all part of
Mhm.
their learning,
Mhm.
development, which can be really fun, and a bit messy, which is
Mhm.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. All right. This is a big topic also that we get calls about. Alyssa, advice about picky. or fussy eaters?
Yeah. So this is a really big one, I think. And a lot of times we'll have parents that will call and say, oh, baby's not really that interested in solids yet. And they may be 6.5, 7 months old. And they'll say, oh, my baby doesn't like that. Well, it takes something like I think it's something like over 20 attempts for us to learn that we don't like something. And also, babies' taste buds change very rapidly. I think it's something like every 2 weeks that a baby's taste buds are changing, which is why, especially as they get into
Mm,
being toddlers, they love something and then they don't want to touch it and they throw it on the floor like it's garbage. And it's just that they're changing. So if you think you have a fussy eater, one of the things is to just offer, keep offering something. Okay. So if it's something like broccoli, right? And we don't think they like broccoli, try and serve it in different ways. If they're into the kind of finger foods now, steam a head of broccoli up, like Lisa was saying. If you can squish it between your fingers, it's safe. Give them a head of broccoli to hold,
mm,
right? They can hold it that way. They can chew on it. Another thing for fussy eaters is they will watch us, right? So if you're eating a piece of broccoli, and getting, showing them how to eat a piece of broccoli. We're going to pick it up. We're going to eat it. We're going to over exaggerate everything we're doing so babies can learn how from us, right? We are the role models for them. If we're sitting down and just feeding our babies, but we're not eating as well, it's a really hard way for them to want to engage and eat the same things. So
mm,
even if you're
mm,
making something that is, maybe you didn't plan on having broccoli for lunch that day, but there's nothing wrong with you having a couple of heads of broccoli as well at the same time. Just show baby, this is how you pick it up, this is how we bite it, this is how we chew it. And again, these are
mm,
your babies who are a bit older, right? They're into their finger foods now versus your kind of 6-month babies. It is very important to role model. I cannot say
mm,
that enough, right? Sitting together, having family meals together, or if it's sitting and you're having oatmeal and baby's having oatmeal, that doesn't mean you have to give baby an entire plate, a bowl of oatmeal. Just take the oatmeal, put a spoonful onto the tray, and let baby pick it up and squish it and play with it. Let them explore the
mm,
textures of food. And that way they can kind of see how it is, how it squishes between their fingers. You can offer them a spoonful at the same time. And again, exposure to it is what's going to encourage them to try it. Okay. Another thing is a lot of times we'll also have parents call and say, oh, they don't really like water, or they don't know how to drink water or their cup yet.
mm,
If you're using something like a weighted straw cup, for them to learn how to use a straw, we need to be showing them this is how you use a straw.
mm,
So sitting and using a straw, or if you're going to get them to learn how to use a cup, we need to sit and use a cup. I don't think many of us use cups anymore at the table. A lot of us just have our water bottles there and we wonder why kids don't know how to use cups anymore. And it's like, well, because we're all using our water bottles. So
mm,
making sure again that we're showing them how to do it. So picky fussy eaters, a lot of times that's created by us because we all of a sudden go, they don't like it. So
mm,
just continue to reintroduce. And as kids get older, um, even if kind of when they are kind of even toddlers, always offering them new foods, but making sure we have what we kind of deem like a safe food along with it, right? So that you've got your, you know, whatever it is, they're going to have chicken tonight and rice, and maybe you're going to try brown rice instead for your toddler. Making sure that they like the chicken, they like the fruit, they like the veg that's on the plate, but that's a new thing for them. But again, we're eating the
mm.
same thing. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So modeling that desired behavior is huge. And when we're eating with our kids, they're going to want to do the same. They're going to want to copy us because that is the best thing to do.
Mm,
Um, Sometimes people get it. We will sometimes get phone calls about prem babies and what do we do with them? How do we get them to start solids? Maybe they're a bit behind. They may be they may be 6 months, but they're 4 months corrected. A lot of times with those, we're going to go more based on age, along with those signs of readiness. But sometimes, depending on how early that baby is, you may need to take them to the doctor, your pediatrician, or have them kind of cleared to make sure they are safe for solids. Because a lot of times, preemie babies do have more complications or complex kind of things that are going on
Mm,
as
yeah.
opposed to kind of a typical term baby may do. So there's a little bit of a gray area with them sometimes, but again, you can always give us a call and we can have a chat specific to your baby. If you do have a
Mhm.
prem baby or somebody who's maybe a baby who's got a bit more kind of more of a medical history than other babies may have. Okay. And Lisa, what do we have for advice for parents about food progression and when we can kind of
Mm.
get them in increasing the amount of solids that they're having?
Yeah, this question is quite hard to answer because every baby is so different.
Hmm.
But we usually try and start, with a few teaspoons, and then once a day, and then sort of a couple of a couple of tablespoons or half a cup, um, and then that's when we sort of say to you or I think, yeah, let's try and get a little bit more and add um, another meal. Like
Hmm.
Alyssa said, generally one in the morning after a milk feed, and then early in the afternoon, which is sort of what what we sort of say to do.
Hmm.
And the other thing is, as Alyssa has said, that if you're going to introduce allergens, do it in the morning, and then in the afternoon, giving something. If you are giving an allergen, one that has already been tolerated by the baby.
Hmm.
Yeah, it is all about their gut adjusting to the new um, foods. And if you are finding that they're not quite tolerating that second or third meal, just to down it back, bring it back a little bit.
Hmm.
Maybe reduce the amount of food that you are offering, or adding some extra foods if you think that they're getting adding a little bit of liquid into the food if you are
Hmm.
feeling that they are getting a little bit constipated.
Hmm.
Um, the other things that we do find as they eat more, they do drink a little bit less. And this is also okay too. Remembering that the first foods are complementary foods. And so for that this from 6 months to 8 months, we do say to start off with milk and then add the food. Uh, so we do say to keep offering the milk
Hmm.
6 months to 8 months, and then after that, uh, food first and then milk.
Hmm.
Um, One of the key indicators that you are sure that the baby is drinking enough milk is their wet nappies. So making sure that they're having good wet nappies. If you are worried about their fluid intake, you can also give us a call as well.
Hmm.
And these are really valid questions as well that people may have. The other thoughts that I thought we'd touch on is how long after milk do you offer solids? And
Hmm.
we sort of think, well, you have your meal first and then you have dessert. So essentially that's what we say. So milk first, or like the main meal first, and then the solids after. So usually about 20 minutes to half an hour after solids. Did you have any other thoughts, Alyssa, or
I was the
did
only
we
thing I was
cover
going to
that?
think about that we actually haven't really talked about was how do we know when a baby's done? If they're sitting in their high chair
Mm,
and signs that they've kind of had enough, right? Because that's something that we often get calls with as well. Or if we, they will quite often say they're not eating very much, and we'll say, well, how do you know they're finished?
mm,
So yeah, maybe just touching on that a little bit. So like,
um,
I always say to people, they're whacking the spoon away,
yeah,
right?
whack it, yeah.
They're whacking the spoon
Closing their
away.
mouth.
Yep. They're pushing the food back out. They're getting real fussy in the high chair. They're,
Yeah.
they're just basically they're done. And sometimes, right, as we know, that might be after 2 teaspoons. They're just not into it
Mm,
today. They're like, "Nah, I'm done." And that's okay. End the feeding session, right? We don't want to
mm,
end this, we don't want to force feed them. That increases our
yes.
risk. So it's just kind of that's when we're done and that's okay.
Yeah.
There's a little
We
side.
do
Sorry,
have a
Lisa. I on
so
that one.
we do have a question, and I think we've answered it, but wondering
Oh,
when can
yeah.
I introduce hazelnut spreads?
Yeah. So I guess that's a difficult one because hazelnut spreads, I'm assuming that that's like a Nutella, if that's the route we're kind of going with this
Mm,
versus like a nut butter. So if we're talking about hazelnut spread, like a Nutella-based one, ideally, we're gonna wait till they're after 1 at least, because that's gonna be really high sugar, right? And we've talked about we don't wanna add sugars, we don't wanna add salts to our babies' diets. So something like a Nutella-based spread, um, later on. They don't need to know that there's these really delicious sugary things out there, at this age, right? They don't know about it. They don't know about it. Same with salt. They don't know about salt. So we like salt because we
yeah.
know that it makes the food taste better. They need to learn just what the food tastes like. It doesn't add nutrition for them. They don't need it. So
Mm,
that would be the same with a Nutella spread. Now, if we're talking about a hazelnut, like a hazelnut butter or something like an almond butter, a nut butter, cashew butter, those kind of things, those again, same thing, early and often. So
mm,
you're going to
yeah.
introduce them, and a lot of times with butter, with the nut butters or peanut butter, they're they're quite thick, quite pasty, right? So you'd want to thin them down a little bit, so that you could decrease the risk of basically them kind of getting too tacky in their mouth and kind of an increased risk for gagging and choking as well. So yeah, Nutella, as long as you can push it out for, ideally, and nut butters early and often, right from the get-go, kind of 6 months. One of my
Mm,
girls'
mm,
favorite purees to make was actually orange kumara with a nut butter in it. Again, once we've tested it 3 days in a row, we know it's safe, always
yeah.
easy, great protein and that kind of stuff in nut butters
Mm,
as well for
mm,
them. Yeah, so
yeah.
another
And
question we've got.
I
Oh,
see.
sorry, go ahead, Lisa. Yeah, go.
I was just going to say that sometimes the foods may be bland to us, but
Mm.
actually super nice for them.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, well, it's all new, isn't
yeah,
it? They're
totally.
just used to
Yeah,
their milk,
totally.
breast milk or formula, so for them,
Yeah,
it's all exciting. So
delicious.
another question we've got is, hi there, Bub's reaction on skin to egg, hard-boiled and mash, as it sat on the face for a little while. Whenever he's touched, left a red mark. Baby wasn't upset nor having any trouble breathing. That was second day. First day was probably a bit crumblier as it was cooked a little longer, so it didn't stick to the face and did not attempt third day. Is it okay to wait a week and then introduce slowly? What do you recommend? So that one's again because of high allergen, probably on the safest side would be to go to the GP, have a chat with
Mm,
the GP. It's sounding like it's most likely a contact reaction, which can be quite common for some foods. But again, because it is that high allergen, I would think best have a chat with the GP. There are is kind of like when you get into things like eggs, or cow's milk, a lot of times they'll put you onto what they call like an introduction ladder. So it's
mm,
kind of that, it may not be, instead of offering a whole egg to a baby, you may introduce it in, cooked into something.
co-
So it might be like one egg into a batch of muffins. And then once
mm,
they're eating that muffin, and there's no reactions, then it might be, something like maybe a couple eggs into a smaller batch of muffins. So you just kind of slowly introducing it. But I think to err on the side of caution, if babies had a reaction kind of getting progressively worse over those 2 days,
mm,
then visit with the GP first before you give that allergen again. Have a chat with the GP, see what they think, and yeah, go from there. I think is probably the safest bet when you've got an allergy an allergen,
mm.
sorry, that you're introducing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's there's another question.
Oh yeah.
Does solid help baby sleep longer? The answer is yes.
Yes. Yes.
So we do talk about calories,
Hmm.
and getting as many calories into your baby during the day,
Hmm.
and this is more sort of like the 8 to 10 month olds. Um, who I'm talking about generally.
Hmm.
Food for 6 months to 8 months. It's still part of getting those calories in, but definitely the older children that are eating
Hmm.
a little bit more, we do encourage to try and get in those high calorie foods during the day, so that
Yeah.
then at night they do sleep. We do. I'm not sure if it's like true evidence, but banana is a great snack before bed to
It
help
causes constipation.
sleep. It does. It does cause
So if it's not ripe
constipation.
enough, if you got a baby who's constipated, don't go with bananas.
Don't go bananas.
High fat, high protein. Those are your
Yeah,
friends. High fat, high
yeah.
protein. So always think when you're making a baby's meal, high fat, high protein. Avocados, cheap right now, really
Cheap.
high fat, really
Yeah,
good for them, right?
yeah.
And then high proteins, once we've cleared them onto kind of dairies, Greek yogurts. Full fat. It needs to be like, don't be going for the light versions
Yes,
of things because that's just got higher, more sugar added into it to make it taste good because we've taken
tastes
the
good.
fat away. So for kids, high fat, the highest fat possible. And yeah, high fat, high protein is just always thinking of that, especially when you start to introduce
Mm,
snacks as well to them. And you
yes.
kind of are doing your 3 meals a day, and now we're adding snacks in there. Hummus, great high fats, right? We've got our and protein. So we've got our chickpeas in there and all those kind of things. So really
Mm,
thinking of cottage cheeses, so high fats, high proteins, those kind of things, which are going to help as we build those calories throughout the day, are going to help them sleep longer at night. It
yeah.
does not mean it's the cure for sleep. Okay. It's not just because your baby's now, it doesn't mean your baby's going to sleep all night long. And Lisa and I don't have a magic wand to make your baby sleep all night long because we would be living on a private island somewhere if we did. But it's helpful. It's definitely helpful if high fat, high protein, build the calories along with the breast milk or the formula during the day will help them stretch longer at night.
Okay, Alyssa, I'll get you to ask this question.
Okay.
Any recommendations on must-have tools, appliances to help when starting solids?
Yeah. Oh, you could spend a fortune on this. There's so many
Yeah.
things, right? A couple of things that I think that are really good, and again, this is going to be pretty individual for people. You don't need fancy spoons. A small teaspoon, as long as it has no sharp edges, is fine. So the one that you use to make your cup of coffee in the morning is fine. You can go with the plastic ones, you can get flexible ones. There's so many. It's kind of what works for you. As they get older, some of the suction ones are great. Some kids are really good at getting them off and chucking that plate across the floor. High chairs, necessity, right? You can pick up a really good secondhand one, totally fine. So high chairs that are easy to clean are really important. And things that are good are, yes, spoons, some sort of a cup that whether you're going to go with a weighted straw cup, a sippy cup, an open cup, any of those things, something that's, small enough for them to grip. I've heard of people using small little cups that are potentially glass that you put adult drinks in, are good little hand sizes for kids to drink from.
Mm,
Um, so they've got their water out of that one. So those are going to be really important. High chair, I mean bibs, that's you can get the sleeved bibs that have the pocket in the front or a bib, or you can just strip them and whatever works for you. You don't
mm,
have to go out and buy a million things. One thing that
yeah.
I think is really, really good, which not just goes with solids but can help with teething as well, are the mesh or the silicone feeders. And they're quite nice because you can put things, if you've got a 6-month-old who started solids but isn't really at that finger food stage, but putting something like, I mean, especially right now in the summer, watermelon chunks in it so that they can
Mm,
mash away on it. Feels great for teething babies. Also helps with hydration because it's a it's a high water content, but helps their soothing gums. Frozen peas and corn,
mm,
really cheap. Chuck them in the silicone feeder and they can chomp away on those. So those are quite good. But again, it's you don't have to go and buy everything in under the sun. As they progress, you may like I said, the silicone ones that stick on the table, on their high chair, just to make things a little bit easier. But again, you don't need to go nuts with all the
mm,
latest and
mm,
greatest and spend a fortune.
mm.
So yeah,
Cool.
cool.
We also had a question about vitamin D.
Mm,
Do we continue vitamin D once we start solids?
yeah, and again, that's a trickier one because it depends on why
Mm,
your baby's on vitamin D. right? If you've got a prem baby who's on vitamin D, you would have to have that GP, the discussion with your GP. If you've got a well baby who's potentially living just somewhere in the island, like I know a lot of babies down in Wellington, even though they're term babies, are prescribed vitamin D just based on their location. It's not going to harm them if they carry on with their vitamin D, but if they're having, again, once they're kind of into a really nutritionally sound diet, then you don't need to continue it. But again, it depends on why they're on that vitamin D in the beginning, I would say. So we've got a question about how long can you freeze homemade purees and keep them in the fridge? So
Yeah.
that kind of runs into our next topic a little bit,
Yes,
doesn't
it
it,
does.
Lisa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, food safety tips for whānau,
Okay.
Melissa.
So we'll answer that one right off the get-go because it's there. Freezing homemade purees, you would go with kind of your same guidelines for freezing food. So generally, you want to use that up within 3 months, kind of
Yeah.
maximum. So making sure if you're going to freeze them, you're labeling what it is, you're labeling the date that you've made it, and storing them. Lots of different ways that you can freeze things. You again can buy fancy little food freezers if you really want to for baby food. Ice cube trays work well because then again, if you've got, you might have a bag of kumara that you've frozen and you've got some carrot that you've frozen and you're making up some chicken. Well, we can now take a cube of this and a cube of that, get them out, defrost them, bring them up to temp, and cool them down again and give them to baby. So a nice way to be able to kind of bulk cook for babies, because if you think about things like, you think about things like a carrot or even like a kumara, a baby's not going to sit and eat an entire kumara in a whole sitting, right? So if you're going to cook it and put it in the fridge, you've got 48 hours to use it up. So again, pretty similar rules to what we should all be following as adults, but most of us do stretch it. But for kids, it's 48 hours for our babies. And
Mm,
again, so same thing, important, especially if you're the one that's doing the cooking, but somebody else might be home. You've got a nanny, you've got Nana that looks after the baby, dad's giving dinner because you're out or whatever, or partner giving the dinner, making sure that we know what's dated, date and time that it's been made. So again, we're keeping it really safe. Okay. So breeding grounds, especially if we've got food that we've left it on the counter, if we've made purees, it needs to be stored properly within 2 hours because warm environments are just breeding grounds for bacteria.
mm,
So
mm,
really making sure that we've either got it popped in the freezer, popped in the fridge, kind of once it's kind of at the right temperature to be put into those areas. So 48 hours
yeah.
for the fridge and kind of 3 months for the frozen stuff. Okay. So other things to talk about with food safety is the choking versus gagging. Okay. Really, really important for parents or caregivers to understand the difference and what they look like, right? Gagging, we've got a baby who's actively making noise, making the gagging look, right? But they may be coughing, they may have vomited, which is fine. Again, we're protecting that very narrow airway. So
Mm,
they vomit, fine, no big deal. It's better. It's better that they vomit, just clear that airway as fast as possible. Or a gag and a cough. We have no color change and we have noise. Choking, we have color change. So baby's going to go red or purpley color, and there is no sound with these
mm,
babies. This is why
mm,
it is so important to supervise our children when we're feeding them. Okay.
mm,
We're not kind of, we're sitting with them, whether we're eating with them, but always making sure that we have them in our vision so we can watch them as they're eating. A
mm,
really good thing, I think, especially if you're a parent who's starting off as your first baby, you're a bit nervous about starting solids, is to take a first aid course so you know how to deal with your child if there was an episode of choking. You don't need anything fancy, basic first aid, really good to do. Okay. And again, if you've got any concerns about it, there's lots of videos online that you can watch for starting solids of choking versus gagging. But again, important to know the difference.
mm,
Other ways that we can decrease the risk for choking and gagging is one, obviously, our safe food preparation. So, making it appropriately. We're not going to give a 6-month-old baby, you know, a vegetable that's not really soft and mashy or pureed. You're not going to give them a whole
mm,
apple to eat right away.
mm,
So something like that, make sure we've got safe food preparation. We're sitting in a designated area. So we're not sitting, kind of where there's lots of distractions happening and, lots going on. So we've got them
Mm,
sitting in their high chair. That's the safest spot for them. We're supervising them. Um, and then that way we can kind of decrease those risks. Okay. Other things that are important is yes, we need to make sure we're cleaning everything really well. So hot soapy water for cleaning them or dishwashers. And we've had a question here, it looks like about temperatures and how important is it for
yeah.
temperatures, or can we give cold puree straight from the fridge? Again, this will be dependent on the age of the child and depending on what it is. Okay, so if you're going to give them something that has been cooked and as a puree, you want to bring it up to temperature in the microwave so it's hot. Like it's kind of one of those ones you semi have to plan ahead, because we want to cook it to make sure it's now food safe, right? So if there was any
Mm,
bacteria or anything, we've got it so it's safe for the babies. And then it obviously needs
mm,
to come back to temperature. So this is where you can do things. If you're going to give a puree, let's say, and your plan is to add things like formula or breast milk into it, make this quite thick when you initially make it. Heat it up
yeah.
to temperature, and then you can use things like your breast milk or your whole, your fresh formula that you've just made to bring it back down.
Mm,
Okay, so then that way again, but then it's used now. You don't get to put that
yeah.
one away in the fridge. So you're going to use it
Yeah.
up. Um, and then that way it's kind of, you're doing it as safe as possible for them. And always make sure if you have heated things up really well, stir it really well, right? You've got it in the microwave, stir it up really, really, really well. So you've got no hot spots in it. Test it either on your wrist, right inside of your wrist, or onto your lips, to make sure that it's not too hot for baby, and just lots of time for things to cool down for them. And that's your safest way. As your babies get older, then you can kind of let them start, if it's something like you've made an apple puree, something like that, or you're using a pouch, then you can kind of let those be at room temperature if you're opening a fresh pouch. And again, we touched a little bit on pouches before, but making sure that we're not letting our kids just suck from pouches, even if we're out and about. We've got a spoon. There are ones that you can get fancy little attachments that attach to the spout, that to it, that is a spoon, and you squeeze it out and
Yeah.
give it to baby. You can do that, or just squeeze it onto a spoon and offer it. It's for a lot of
Mm,
different reasons. Main reason is we need them to be able to learn to chew,
true.
right? Foods,
Yeah.
chew and swallow, because if they're just sucking a pouch back, they're not going to learn how to do that. And also, it can impact speech as well, because we need them to learn how to move the tongue around their mouth for chewing and swallowing,
Mm,
which also helps with speech later on.
yeah.
Um, but yes, I think that kind of, does that cover our food and safety tips? I think pretty
Sounds
much.
great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Okay. Um, and what have we got for another one? Until what age, Lisa, can a toddler drink the formula milk?
That's a really good question.
Controversial one
So
as well, I think.
yeah. So from age 1, they can be introduced to cow's milk.
Mhm.
If there are allergies, obviously you don't want to do that. Um, but I say to parents, it's sort of preference as well. Cost is probably the biggest one.
Mhm.
Having a formula versus a milk, and uh, in regards to what age. Um, I
There
guess
isn't
it's
really, so again, this is, and I guess this is, I don't know if this is my, like, we don't really have anything in the Plunkett kind of guides for
no.
this, to be quite honest. But from research that I did when I had my children, toddler milks are marketing. When they get past the
Yes,
stage 2, it's marketing,
marketing.
because
Yeah.
they don't technically need it anymore for most healthy children, right? Again, we tend to talk more about the healthy children. Okay, if you've
Mm,
got a child who has a failure to thrive, needs more calories for medical reasons, that's again different, which you'd be looking at more of your directive from your doctor. But if you have a well child, toddler milk is very much a marketing ploy by the
marketing.
formula companies. Stage 1,
Yeah.
stage 2 formulas are very heavily regulated by the government to be as close to breast milk as possible, so they have regulations. Once babies are over the age of 1, general kind of Ministry of Health guidelines, World Health Organizations, all that kind of stuff go to dairy milk, or even dairy milk alternatives now, because again, the
Mm,
expectation from the age of 1 is their main source of nutrition is food now. Okay, so we're
yes.
making the flip from milk to food. So if you have
Mm.
a baby who's drinking loads of toddler milk and filling up on their calories that way, they're not going to be eating a balanced diet because they don't have the space for it. So if you're looking at just giving them their like, maybe they have a couple of bottles a day, they may have a bottle before a nap or a bottle before bed, um, then you could look at moving into, to dairy, if to dairy milk if you wanted to, or if you did want to keep them on the formula, you could keep them on a stage 2, but there isn't an actual like by age, X, they need to be off
Thanks.
of
Yeah.
the toddler formula.
Toddler milk. Yeah.
It just really is a preference for people. And
Mm.
yeah, so it's a lot of times, but again, I would be looking at how much of this bottle is baby drinking versus
Yeah.
what they're eating for solids.
Mm.
So again, you can give us
Yeah.
a call at Plunkett Line and we can have a chat about that as well.
Mm. Mm.
So the next question is about high chairs with footrests. Oh yeah, okay, this is another big one. I did a bunch of research into this as well when I had my girls.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I've seen, yeah, I've
This is,
seen
this
people
is a new
talking about
one for
having their
me.
feet flat. Oh, has it? Yep. So while they're in their high
Yeah.
chair, but our footrest is an adjustable. Okay, right. So the thing is with this, very few 6-month-old babies in any high chair are going to hit a footrest. It's just their legs are too little. They pretty much just stick out the end. The idea between the footrest is that you're trying to keep everything like if you were an adult sitting, right? So your legs are straight and knees down. So everything's kind of in line, right? In an ideal world for digestion, it would be great because then they don't slip and slide as much if they have a footrest as well. You can buy high chairs that have adjustable footrest. You can buy like a little sling thing that can attach to your high chair depending on the high chair. Um,
Mm.
but I guess it depends, and you'd have to look at it and go, how old is baby and how far away from this footrest? I personally think this probably comes more into play when they're kind of like closer to the age of 1, when they actually can, reach a footrest properly and are sitting up quite properly versus something like a 6 or a 7-month-old baby, because most of them aren't long enough to even
Mm.
have their legs dangling over enough um, to kind of hit a footrest. So I hope that
Yeah.
answers your question. Yeah. And the next one is any
Yeah.
free resources in New Zealand with ideas for babies according to age. Lots. There's lots of resources. And if we're talking about kind of Watties has a food guide that does have kind
Yeah.
of what foods you can offer at each stage. There is the Kids Health website has some really great resources on it as well about starting solids and what you can start. I think the Plunkett,
Raising children.
yeah, such a good website for so
Raising
much.
children is a great one. And the
Yeah,
Plunkett website has the Watties link
food
to it
guide.
as well.
Yeah, link
Yeah.
to it. Yeah, so
Which is great.
there are lots of stuff out there, and the only real rule of thumb for children once they're into solids is the only thing they really can't have is honey. You want to avoid
Mm.
things like your unpasteurized milks and your unpasteurized cheeses and that kind of stuff, but there isn't really anything specific as in like they cannot have anything. Um, but it is kind of about a variety, giving variety and lots of different things. And ideally, by the age of 1, they're pretty much eating what we're eating, right? So
Yeah.
we're kind of eating all those things. So yeah, but yeah, so have a look at the Raising Children website, the Plunkett website for starting solids, Kids Health, and the Watties food guides. But to be honest, there's lots of different Instagram
Asking
accounts and
asking friends as well as
yeah,
asking other people that have babies
yeah,
about what they
yeah.
found
Yeah, what
good
they found
too.
works or yeah. Um,
Yeah.
there's lots of different, library books, right? There'll be loads of library books on what to make for baby food and um yeah, so again, just think high fat, high protein, right? And again, if you're talking about, I probably should have touched on this a little bit earlier, but about the iron intake, we've got iron trying to give something that's kind of citrusy or like high in vitamin C along with it that's going to help with the absorption of iron.
Okay.
Which
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily, vitamin C doesn't just come from citrus fruits. It does come from lots of vegetables and things like that as well. So introducing,
Mm.
if you're going to give them something like some red meat, you might want to put something that's like broccoli is quite high in vitamin C and also high in iron.
Yeah.
So you might want to give them that to kind of complement that as well.
Mm. Mm.
Um, so yeah, so I think that kind of wraps up all of our questions that we've had come through. So thank you guys so much for that. And our winner for our Watties giveaway is Reina Sauce. I hope I've said your name right. If I haven't, I apologize. So please send a DM so that we can organize a way to get your package to you. And congratulations on winning that. And hopefully that will definitely help you on your introduction to solids. And remember, guys, this is fun. It's messy. It's messy. Don't get me wrong. It is messy, but it is fun, and it's very exciting. It's nerve wracking. It's all those things. So, if you're at the point that you're ready to start solids with your little pēpi, then give us a call. If you get Lisa and I, as you can see, we love to chat about it, but a lot of the other plunkett nurses do as well. Or if your plunkett nurse is coming for a visit, then have a chat. But we're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if you need us for any of it. But yeah, so thank you everyone for hanging out with us today and chatting solids. Have a great week, everyone.